Hey everybody, and welcome to ON1 Photo RAW 2026 from A to Z. My name is Dylan Kotecki, and I'm joined by none other than Mr. Dan Harlacher.
Hi, everyone.
Throughout this event, we're going to walk you through all of the new and exciting updates inside of ON1 Photo RAW 2026, giving you a complete tour from start to finish. But to begin, we put together a little film that highlights all of the amazing new stuff.
Introducing the all-new ON1 Photo RAW 2026. If you thought ON1 Photo RAW was already powerful, wait until you see what's coming in version 2026. Masking just got a lot smarter, faster, and more flexible, with mask layers and one-click subject and background masks. 4 powerful new filters: depth lighting, split field, double exposure, and motion. They solve real-world challenges and unlock amazing new looks. The industry's best super resolution tool is now fully built into Photo RAW 2026. From negative mode for film scans to improved perspective correction and improvements to the user interface, every detail is built to make editing faster and more enjoyable. ON1 Photo RAW 2026 isn't just a new release, it's your all-in-one editing powerhouse, built for photographers who want it all.
All right, now let's dive deep into each of those new features. Let's get started with our first segment. Take it away, Dan.
Thanks, Dylan. We'll kick things off with one of the most powerful updates, the complete integration of the new ON1 Resize AI 2026 and its amazing new models. Let's talk about how ON1 Resize is completely integrated into ON1 Photo RAW 2026. Let me show you how to use it. I just have a photo open here in Browse. If I want to take it to Resize, I just click on the More button and I send it to Resize AI. Now, some of you are probably asking, what does Resize AI do? Well, what it lets you do is take a portion of a photo or even the whole photo and blow it up much larger than the original while maintaining, scratch that, creating new and improved detail that's not even in the original photo. It even reduces noise. So here we've got an original photo. You can see it's pretty big. It's almost 6,000 by 4,000 pixels. That's a pretty good size photo. But the problem is the eagle in the shot is pretty small. And you'll notice there's some JPEG artifacting in the background on it. So even though it's a big photo, if we focus on the subject, the eagle doesn't look that hot. Now let's say that my job is I need to make a cover for a magazine or a book that's 8.5 by 11 out of it. So let me go back to the fit screen here. I'm going to grab the crop tool and let's say, well, I need to make this 8.5 by 11 and I want to make it a vertical one. So I'm just going to flip my orientation around. And now I need to zoom in a bit so that I can make a more compelling cover. So I'm going to put the eagle down here in the corner. Let's make it even tighter than that. Got to make it, leave a little bit of room at the top so that I can put in the masthead of the book or the title of the book or magazine. So I'm left with something about this size. By the time I crop it down to that, now I'm down to just a little over 1,000 pixels on each side. That's not big enough to actually print a 8.5 by 11. So I need to scale it up in size. So watch, I'm just going to hit the 4x increase in size. And in the settings pane, I'm going to use the highest quality option. This uses a brand new state-of-the-art diffusion-based super resolution model. And that's a whole lot to say that it's magic. So watch, I'm going to zoom in here on this photo. That's the original pixels. And kapow, look at that. That is a night and day difference. Let me do a little split screen so you can see the difference. So that's before and that's after. It's hard to believe that it could take something that noisy and that out of focus with such little information and create that kind of crazy high detail, hyper realistic results. And that's without it even putting any sharpening on it. Watch what happens if I add just a touch of sharpening to it. It really is an absolutely amazing new model that produces the best results of any super resolution model that we have seen on the market today. We really think you're going to love it. Okay, now let's talk about everyone's favorite topic, and that's masking. Masking is really at the heart and soul of Photo RAW. It drives so many of the core workflows that we all use every day. And in 2026, we really overhauled masking. And we kind of had three goals going into this. First was to make sure that the masking results were better. Second was to make it more flexible and more powerful to use. And third was to make it easier without making it wildly different for you, the existing user. So if you're an existing user, you can keep working the same way that you always have. All of the tools and all the features are still there and work the same way. However, you're going to love these new improvements, and we really think that they're going to be a big game changer for your workflow. So let's dig in and show you the first big improvement, and that's the automatic subject and background masking. Here I've opened up an average photo. And let's say I just want to sharpen this dog and I want to open up the shadows a little bit. So I'm just going to go to my local adjustments. And right off the bat, you'll notice it looks a little bit different at the top. There are some new buttons in here. I can press the brush button that lets me paint in an adjustment. That's the same thing that would have happened in the past if I hit the add adjustment button. But now there's also options for subject and background and sky. And if I click on the little more menu over here, you can see I can actually apply a mask using any of the automatic ways or any of the manual tools. Very, very powerful and flexible. The one I want to focus on right now is that subject and background mask. And the subject and background are basically the inverse of each other. You can either pick the subject or the stuff that isn't the subject, which is the background. So in this case, I want to work on our puppy dog here. So I'm just going to click the subject button. This is going to add a local adjustment, and it's going to build a mask automatically just for the dog. Now, one thing you're going to notice right off the bat is that when I added that local adjustment, nothing changed in the photo. It used to automatically turn the exposure down one f-stop so that you can see when it was added. People have complained about that for years, so we set it so it doesn't do anything. So you guys are going to like that difference. So let me go back to the default, and I'm just going to press the O key on my keyboard, or I'm going to show you the mask preview just by clicking on the mask preview icon. And right there, you can see a grayscale representation of that mask. You can see how it's picked the subject, the dog, for us automatically, and it's done an amazing job along the edge. It's actually found all of those tiny little hairs and built a very highly accurate mask for me. And I didn't have to do anything but press one button, just press that subject button. I'm going to turn that mask preview off here. And now let's say we want to make an effect on the dog. Well, all I would do now is make my normal kind of adjustment. So let's say I wanted to bring those shadows up a little bit, maybe my highlights down a little bit, and I wanted to add a little bit more detail. So I'm just going to use the structure slider to bring the structure up. There we go. So if I turn this on and off, you will see before and after. I was able to make a very accurate, very targeted adjustment just to the dog by using that subject masking option. If I wanted to darken the background, it works the exact same way. I would just click on the background button. Now it's going to add another adjustment, but it's going to be focused on the background instead. There we go. And then if I wanted to darken it, I could just grab the exposure slider and I could darken the background down. There, just like that. Let me turn the preview on and off so you can see it before and after. So there's our original, and there's our after. We were able to enhance the dog, darken the background, just by using two local adjustments and the power of that new subject and background automatic masking. Now let me show you how good this masking is on a couple of other photos, just so you can really kind of appreciate how good it is. So I'm going to move to one with hair. We all know that hair is a difficult subject to mask. So let's say I wanted to replace the background in this photo. I'm just going to go to Effects, and I'm going to add a filter to it. And let's add a texturizer. I don't want to get ahead of myself here, but you'll notice things look a little bit different here in the Add Filter dialog as well. We'll talk about that here in a minute, but those same subject and background options exist here in the Apply To option. So if I wanted to apply it to the background, I can just select the background option, and then I'll pick textures. I'm going to pick a different background, like one of these studio backdrop looking ones. We'll find one that kind of fits our subject well. There we go. Now, if we do the same thing, we hit that O key or we turn on our mask preview, you can actually see what that mask looks like. you can see how it's picked up all the little hairs, and it's done a great job of creating a highly accurate mask. I didn't have to pick up the refine brush and use any of those other tools to do this. I actually got a really good mask right off the bat. And we've also added some new tools to help you improve that even more, because depending on where you're going, in this case, I had a white background going against a dark background, I might want to be able to move the edge of that mask a little bit. So I'm going to use a new feature in the called the Refine Mask dialog. So here in my masking layers, and Dylan will show you guys more about this here in a few minutes. I just want to show you in this scenario here. I'm just going to click on the little hamburger menu and open the Refine Mask dialog. And this gives you all the stuff that you used to see in the masking global operations, but now it pops up in its own dialog, giving you a little bit more room and precision to work with it. One of the new tools in here is called Shift Edge. And with Shift Edge, I can actually move the edge of the mask in or out a little bit so I can help reduce halos. So I'm just going to bring that edge in. I'm just going to shift it in a little bit more. And you notice that any of that lighten or those bright white hairs that were in there are now gone. Voila, just like that. So again, highly accurate masks without the fuss of having to use multiple tools. I just click on a single button. Now that's with hair. The other one that's always a challenge is working with trees. So let's go take a look at some trees. So here we have a tree. Obviously, when you work on trees, there's all these tiny little intricate details in the branches and such. All right, let me show you how well that subject and background masking works. Let's just add a local adjustment. I'll use subject again. There we go. And let's just say I wanted to brighten that tree up a little bit more. So I can just increase the exposure. Maybe I want to make it a little bit warmer too. My goal is to really kind of make that tree pop out a bunch. There we go. Let's zoom in. And you can see how it has made, again, a very highly accurate mask. If we turn on that mask preview, you can see how it's getting all the way down inside of the deep little branches all the way on the inside of the tree. So this means it can do difficult, tough masks very accurately. It's great for trees, hair, smoke, fog, and anything that you want. It can even do semi-transparent things like smoke and wedding veils. Let me show you on a wedding veil photo real fast here. Here we go. Let's say I want to take this photo and I want to make everything in the background grayscale. So to do that, I would just go to my effects. I'll say add filter. I want to apply to my background a black and white filter. And look at that. You can see how it's actually applied that black and white filter to the background. It's kept our bride in color. It's even kept the veil in color. And if we look again at this, and again, if we look at the mask, you can see just how accurate that mask is. It's even made the veil semi-transparent. So the thicker portions of the veil stay in color, and it actually fades naturally into grayscale where the background is the more dominant part of the veil. So pretty amazing what you can do with the new subject and background masking. And now to show you just how much more the masking has evolved, I'm going to turn it over to Dylan. He's going to show you guys all of the cool stuff you can do with masking layers now. So here you go. Take it away, Dylan.
Thanks, Dan. And building on those AI masking updates, ON1 Photo RAW 2026 introduces mask layers. With mask layers, you can create multiple masks on a single adjustment, filter, or even layer to target exactly which region or subject you're looking for inside of your editing. Let's dive in and take a look. So with mask layers, you can use them to combine AI masks with subject masks. You can use luminosity masks combined with background masks, you name it. You can use any of these various masking tools inside of Photo RAW in conjunction with one another with mask layers. It's a really, really awesome tool, especially if you're looking to target or protect a very specific region within your image. So let's take a look at this photo here. We have this portrait capture, and you can see there was a flash over here on the left-hand side of the frame. And as that distance falls off, so does the light within the scene. And so we're losing a lot of that light within that background area there. Well, what we can do with these mask layers is we can actually add in a depth mask here. We can mask in light into this back section here, while also protecting our subject with a subject mask. So we're going to use a depth mask in conjunction with a subject mask to combat that lighting fall off within this portrait capture. It's really, really easy to do. I think I'm making it sound way more difficult than it is. So let's jump in here to local. We're going to go to more, and we're going to use a depth mask. Now, with depth masks, by default, they're going to target the areas closest to the camera. And as the distance falls off, so does the amount of that mask. So let's just hit O on the keyboard to view our mask. You can see the majority of the mask is being applied to these areas that are right next to the camera. And as the distance falls off, so does that mask. Now, what we want to do here is we actually want to invert this mask so that it is mainly applied to the background region. That way, the areas furthest away from the camera are the ones getting the majority of that mask. So what we're going to do is we're going to open the masking tools for this local adjustment here. You can click on the little mask there, or you can just click on the masking tab. And we're going to go into mask layers, this new feature here. We have this mask layers option. So in my mask layers, I'm going to make sure I'm using this depth mask part right here. I'm going to go to the little hamburger menu, and I'm actually going to invert that mask. So now if I hit O on my keyboard, you can see now the majority of that mask is being applied to the background. Well, the cool thing about depth masks is we can actually modify the distance here with this slider. So let's pull it back even further. So we're really just targeting that area in the back, because as you can see, there's a whole lot of light coming in right here. We probably don't need to apply any lighting to this particular section. We really just need it applied to this background area. So that's looking pretty good. Let's just maybe pull it back even more, maybe around 70 or so. So now with our local adjustment, let's add in some light. I'm just going to use lighten. Maybe pull it up just a little bit more. And now we're really doing a great job at correcting that light fall off there, and it's only being applied to that background section. Now, with that light here, because it's being applied to everything within this photo that is in that background area, it's also being applied to our subject. But let's say we want to target that subject independently of this mask. We want to protect our subject within this scene from the mask. We can go to our mask layers here. We can use this little plus icon, and we can add in any other mask into our mask layers that we need. So let's use subject here, and we're going to use subtract. When you choose subtract, it essentially means paint out or protect. So we're going to use subject, and we'll use subtract. It will identify the subject within our scene, and it will mask that subject away from our depth mask. You can see here, right in there, it's only applying the mask to the areas surrounding the subject, but it has the subject protected. So we've created multiple mask layers now for this one adjustment. So I'm just going to hit O on my keyboard now, and there we go. We've protected our subject from that adjustment and the depth mask by using our mask layers. So now let's create a whole new local adjustment by just clicking on subject, and then we can target just our subject independently of that other local adjustment so that we can really fine tune how she looks within the scene. Maybe pull back on the opacity a little bit, but just give her a little bit of light compared to what she was. And now we can modify those two adjustments independently of one another so that we really can fine tune the lighting within this scene without crossing any sort of areas that we don't want to be modified. So let's check out our original and after, and it's doing a great job of protecting our subject while also providing a little bit more backlighting where that light fell off a little bit. Now let me show you another instance where you might want to use multiple mask layers in a single adjustment. So let's take this coffee cup, for example, just an ordinary everyday coffee cup. But with this coffee cup, let's say we want to illuminate just the right side. We have a lot of light coming in from the left, and it's leaving this right side a bit shadowed, and we want to illuminate that side. You can do this with portraits, you can do this with this coffee cup, but there's a lot of times when you just want the right or left or top or bottom sides of a subject to be modified with an adjustment, either to illuminate them, add in a bit of temperature change, you name it. There's a lot of times where you want to target just specific regions of a subject. So let's go in here and let's use mask layers to just target this right side of the coffee cup. So I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I'm going to go into local, and we're going to use the more menu to use quick mask AI, and we're going to choose add so that when we create the mask, it applies the mask to the subject. Remember, with add, it's going to apply the mask to that area you have selected, and subtract is going to protect or paint out from that area you have selected. Now, with Quick Mask AI, I really love the fact that you can just click and drag a little box around whatever you need to select. So I'm just going to click and drag a little box around my coffee cup here, and I'm going to choose this little blue check mark. That's going to apply a mask directly to the coffee cup. Now, let's lighten this up a little bit with some exposure there. Now, I'm going to make it quite intense. It doesn't have to be this intense for your editing, but I really want you to be able to see the before and the after. Remember, inside of Photo RAW, everything is non-destructive, so you can always adjust the opacity to fine-tune or just adjust the slider to your taste. So now let's say we've modified the coffee cup. Now let's say we want to remove this adjustment from the left-hand side. We only want it applied to the right side of the coffee cup. To do that, we're going to add in a gradient mask. We're going to use 2 mask layers. We're going to use this subject mask and then a gradient mask to achieve that right side illumination. So we're going to go into our masking, and we're going to add in a new mask layer here. So remember, click on this little plus icon, and we're going to use gradient, and we're going to choose add so that it applies, and we're going to choose add there. Now, keep in mind, this is by default applied to that bottom section of the scene, but we can just use this smaller handle to rotate, and we just want that right side to be modified. So we're going to drag this gradient over the middle of the coffee cup, and as you can see, it's not actually doing what we want it to do just yet. It's basically saying, hey, we want this coffee cup modified, but we also want this whole right side to be adjusted. Well, in this case, we just want the right side of the coffee cup. So what we're going to do, and I'll do mask view so that you can see this happen, I'm going to use the intersect mode for these mask layers. It's a really awesome tool for if you just want the overlapping masks within your scene to be the only area that's adjusted. So for example, this right side of the coffee cup is overlapping with the right gradient here that I've applied to the image. So we can go into our mask layers. I'll use this little hamburger button here. I'll go to mode, and then watch as I choose intersect. Again, it's just going to target those masks that are overlapped. So intersect, and boom, now we've only targeted that right side of the coffee cup. So now let's view our photo here, and I'll maybe feather it out a bit to make things look nice and natural. And if I turn this off and on here, now it's only being applied to that right-hand side. That mask is only on this right-hand side, and that's because we use that intersect mode, where the only thing that's showing within our mask now are the mask areas that overlapped one another, that were intersecting. So this is a really, really handy feature, especially in portraiture or if you're photographing specific subjects, because you can now target the top, left, right, bottom, the top left corner, you name it. It's a really awesome tool for targeting those very specific regions within a very specific subject. And so let's just check it again, our before and after here. And it's doing a really great job of, again, just illuminating that right-hand side of our subject. And for our next segment on making filters easier to find and use, I'll hand it back to Dan, and he'll show you the new improvements to the filter selection workflow inside of Effects.
All right, thanks, Dylan. I kind of gave you guys a little sneak peek of this next section already in the last one, where we were looking at adding filters. But before we do that, I'm going to jump into the effects starting point. So this is a new way to use effects when it launches. So normally when you go to effects, it starts out with a blank stack. There are no filters in it. To add filters, you click on the add filter button. to get started. And that's kind of different. I mean, if you use any other effects kind of application, there's just kind of the long list of effects that you choose from, especially if you're coming from Lightroom or Capture One. They kind of have their list of things that they can do, and they're out there all the time. Well, that doesn't work very well in Photo RAW because there's like 35 different filters. You wouldn't want to have to scroll up and down 35 different panes. And inside of Photo RAW and effects, the order that the filters are applied actually matters, and you can drag them in their order. You can create wildly different effects by controlling their order, something you can't do in other apps. So what I wanted to do is show you the new effects starting points. They live right here next to the add filter button. You see it says blank. And if you're an existing user, it's going to default to blank, and it'll start out the way you're used to using it. But if you're a new user, it could actually start out here with the ON1 recommends. These are kind of filter stacks of the most commonly used filters, and all you do is you just turn them on to make your adjustments. So for example, if I am a new user and I start out here in the ON1 recommends starting point, it'll start out with dynamic contrast and then moves through some of the most common filters that you would use. And all you do is you just turn on the ones that you want to use and adjust them. So let's say, yep, I love dynamic contrast. I'm going to use that. I'm going to turn it up a little bit higher just for demonstration's sake. I don't need curves on this one, but maybe I want to tweak the color a little bit. So I'll turn on the color mixer. Maybe I want to make my yellows a little bit more green in this photo, and make the greens themselves a little more saturated. There we go. I kind of like that. And then as I scroll up, I can just turn on things that matter to me. You know, I think I want to add a vignette, so I'll turn on a nice strong vignette. There we go. So I used a handful, actually only 3 of those different options, but I picked the ones that I thought I needed for my photo. The other ones are off. That doesn't hurt anything to have them there and turned off. And I was able to very quickly tune my photo, and I didn't have to go use the add filter button. So it's a good way to start out if you're a new user. Or if you're migrating from something like Lightroom or Capture One, we've built in starting points that mimic those. So if I'm a Lightroom user, I can pick the Lightroom option, and you'll see how it puts in all of the same options that you have in Lightroom in the order that Lightroom puts them in. Same thing with Capture One. If you're an advanced user, you can also make your own starting point. So you can actually pick any preset that you have created or any preset that comes with Photo RAW, and that can be your default starting point for effects. So anytime you open a new photo into effects, it'll start out with whatever it is that you like. And you could have filters on or off. So let's say you start out and you always use a dynamic contrast or you always use a vignette. Well, you could have those in and have them on by default, and then you could insert other ones or tweak it to your heart's content. There's one other option that I like too, and that's the last used option that always uses whatever the last stack was that you applied. So let's say you're working on a series of photos and you adjust the first photo, you get it the way you like, and you go to the next photo. It can start with what you did to the last photo without you having to copy and paste that section of the settings. Just another way to optimize your workflow. All right. Anyway, that's how the effect starting points work, but let's talk about the changes in the add filter dialog. I'm just going to reset this photo real fast. So we have nothing on it, to blank and reset. There we go. And when I hit the add filter dialog, you notice it looks a little bit different. So first off, you'll notice that there are now categories for the filters. There's Essentials, Creative, Landscape, and Legacy. The Legacy are ones that, from talking to users, they just don't get used as much. And let's say you don't really care about these filters, and you want to save yourself a little bit of space. You can click over here on this hamburger menu, and you can turn off the Show Legacy Filters option, and it hides those less used ones. Then over here on the right, obviously there's a little before and after preview and a description of those. If you're an advanced user and you don't like to see that, you don't need to see it, you can turn Show Description off, and you can see how it keeps getting smaller, giving you more of your screen back. And again, it's up to you which ones you want to show and display. Something else to notice is as I mouse over each of these, there's a little heart. You can actually mark the ones that are your favorites, and you can search for those very quickly. So let's pick a few favorites. I use black and white all the time, and I use curves, the new depth lighting filter. You guys will see that in a minute. I use that all the time now. Those are some of my favorites. There we go. And of course, I like LUTs and I like lens blur. And you'll see now those have hearts, so it makes them easier to find. And now in the search bar, if I click the little heart at the end, watch what happens. Boop, it hides everything except for my favorites. So it makes it smaller again. And that little heart being on or off is sticky, so it'll always do that if you want. And of course, there's a search bar where you could always just type in whatever you're looking for. Let's say I was looking for curves. I can start to type in curves and it'll filter the list down to just curves for me. So lots of ways to kind of customize the add filter dialog to your taste so that you can hide stuff that you don't care about and that you can mark your favorites so that they're easier to find. The last thing to notice is over here, the Apply To section. This one has changed a little bit now. There are now the new subject and background options. Plus, you can also apply based on depth or luminosity now as well. So more options automatically apply filters to just the parts of the photo that you care about. All right. I think that gives you a good foundation on the new Add Filter button and the effect starting points. I'm going to hand it back to Dylan, and he's going to show you the first of 4, count them 4, brand new filters and effects. That's the one that I mentioned, one of my favorites, the new depth lighting filter. So take it away, Dylan.
Awesome stuff, Dano. I'm incredibly stoked for the new Add Filter dialog. I think it's going to be a game changer when we're looking for specific filters that we want to apply to our images. Now let's dive into a new filter inside of Effects, Depth Lighting. Depth Lighting is an amazing new filter that allows you to target your foreground regions versus your backgrounds so that you can modify the lighting in each of those areas independently. Let's jump in and let's take a look at Depth Lighting. So with Depth Lighting, it's an incredible tool for when you want to relight or fill in light or even remove light in either your foreground or your background of your image. So let's take this portrait for example. You can see it's quite backlit. We have a nice sunny backdrop and it's illuminating the background behind our subject, but we need a little bit more light for her to make her stand out within the scene. So we'll go into Effects, we'll add a filter, and we'll add Depth Lighting. Just like depth masking, it's first going to target the areas closest to the camera first. So if I go into my brightness section here, I can pull up on my foreground lighting, and it's only illuminating those areas that are closest to the camera. You can see it's protecting the areas that are in the background, but this foreground section, especially her, we're bringing in a lot more light, and it's allowing us to see that subject a lot better. Conversely, with the background option here, you can darken the background to add in or to remove light from that background and essentially relight your scene where we have a nice fill light coming into the subject, and we've removed a lot of that backlight so that we now have a much more prominent and illuminated subject within our scene. Now, below the foreground and background sliders here, we have depth and transition. Depth is essentially where that depth is going to fall off in terms of the foreground or background. So if you want it further back, you can pull back on this or pull to the right, and it will bring that depth further back into the background. As I pull it closer, as I pull it to the left, it's going to pull that depth closer, and it's going to illuminate those areas that are right in front of the camera. So you can play with that depth here to see where you want that depth fall off to be. Transition is going to blend the two areas together, our foreground and our background. So if we want the transition to be a little bit more blended, if you will, if you want that foreground and background lighting blend to be a little bit larger, you can use that transition option there. Another cool tool is you can actually modify the color temperature of your foreground versus your background. So let's say we want to modify our foreground, make it a little bit warmer. We can warm her up a little bit, and then we can cool the background. We can modify the color temperature in those two areas independently to create almost a whole different color style in each of those regions. So now we have the original and then after, and we've almost essentially relit the entire scene with just this one filter here. Now, you could also go in and maybe create a high key image if you want to have a really bright background. You can brighten up the background here and create a nice high key photograph where you have a really bright area surrounding your subject. With in-depth lighting, there's also these awesome styles that you can use in case you're looking to just quickly add in or relight specific areas of your scene. One of my favorites is just this fill option. Fill is essentially bringing in light into your foreground to add in some fill light into the subject so that you can see that portrait subject or whatever subject you're capturing much easier and make them stand out within the scene. You can also use backlighting. Backlighting is essentially going to darken that background and illuminate the foreground a bit so that we can see a little bit of backlighting behind our subject there. So feel free to play around with those styles. They're really fun. I'm a huge fan of this depth lighting feature. I think it's going to be a game changer, especially for portrait photographers looking to relight their scenes with a really amazing, easy to use tool. Now let's take a look at some of the other exciting new creative filters inside of Effects.
All right, thanks, Dylan. Let's take a look at the next new filter in Effects, and that's called the split fill filter. Now, if you're a really old photographer like me, you might have actually had a split fill filter. Sometimes they're called a split diopter filter, and it's basically imagine a round filter where half of it is a close-up lens and the other half is just nothing. It's just like, think of it like those old-fashioned glasses where you had like the readers on the bottom and they were open on the top. Same idea, but it will go on a camera. And it was designed for a very specific problem, and it's this one that we have right here. It's when you're wanting to use a wide-angle lens down low so that you can capture the subject in the foreground, and then you have an interesting landscape in the background. The problem with that is, by the time you get that foreground object to fill up an interesting amount of the frame, the background looks like it's 10 miles away. It becomes very small. So what this lets you do is it essentially lets you split the photo and magnify half of it. So here's how it works. Go to Effects, click on the Add Filter button. I'm going to turn off my little heart here so you can see everything. And I'm going to click on the Split Field Filter. It lives in the Creative category. Bulk. All right, so when we add this, you notice how it puts a cyan control on the screen that looks a lot like the gradient mask control. That's kind of what it is. We use this to pick where it's going to split the photo and how it's going to transition from the normal side to the scaled side. So I can grab that and I can move it around. And what I'm looking for in my photo is I need to find kind of a nondescript place between the foreground and the background. And this is where it's going to split and make half of it bigger. So it actually, by default, kind of put it in a pretty good spot for this photo. Now let me show you the options. So over here in the split field filter, there's a scale slider. This controls how much bigger it's going to scale up the background for me. I'm going to use a pretty big one, just for illustration's sake. There's a blur option, which actually lets you soften that background a little bit. So if you're looking to give it a little bit different depth of field, you can actually kind of change the depth of field after the fact. And then down here in the bottom, there's the distance, angle, and transition. And these are all being adjusted by this overlay. So you notice as I move it up or down, it's moving the distance. If I grab that angle handle, I can change the angle. And if I grab the edges, I can control the transition. So it's just another way to make those same adjustments to the photo. One thing that is pretty handy in here is there's a adjust magnified region option. That actually lets you grab the magnified part and manually move it around to a different place in the photo. So if I click on this button, I can now move that around and position it differently if I want to. I'm going to turn that scale up a bit larger here. There we go. And voila. Look how cool that is. If I toggle my preview on and off now, I can see before and after, just like that. It's a fun way to recompose your photo. Now, keep in mind, this isn't going to work on every photo. You have to have kind of that nondescript middle ground area to make it work. Let me show you on another photo here. So here we've got a photo, looks like a Chevy ad. I want to take this big red rock wall and I want to make that the entire background in my photo instead. So watch, we'll do the same thing. I'm just going to add a filter. Let's add split field. Again, I can position exactly where I want that division line to be. I can scale that background up, and then I can, using that adjust magnified region, move my background to where I want it to be. There we go. Then I can adjust the transition, the angle to match my photo the best. There you go. Look at that. It's like a completely different photo done in just a couple of seconds using a traditional filter. Doesn't require AI. All done quickly on your computer, just like that. Pretty cool. Now, In both of these scenarios, I've used it to take the background and make it bigger, but you could also flip it around and you could use it to make foreground objects bigger as well. So let me show you on one other photo, kind of another way to use it. So here I've got one where I want to make my little bison bigger, but I don't want to crop in on the photo. I like the sky and I like the line of the grass. I really just want to kind of make the bison a bit bigger. So we'll do the same thing. Let's add our split field filter. I'm going to pull it down and I'm just going to rotate it. Zoop, turn it around here and put it down at the bottom. So now the bottom is getting bigger and smaller. See? So now I can kind of really recompose my photo, make that bison bigger, and even move it to the position that I want it within the photo without changing the whole rest of the photo. I kept the whole original canvas size, the composition, the sky that I like. All I did is I just kind of made that bottom section a little bit bigger very quickly. No masking required. Great way to very quickly change and stylize your photo. So it's a really, really fun new filter that we think you guys are going to love. All right. You know, while I'm here, let me show you another cool new filter that we have, and that is the new double exposure filter. So let me grab some photos that are a little bit more appropriate than these landscape ones here. All right, so here we go. This photo works well for double exposures, especially with the style that we've seen. You've all seen the photos where you kind of take this high-key background portrait style photo and you use a natural texture over it. So let me show you how you can do this inside of Photo RAW very, very easily. I'm just going to go to the Effects tab, add a filter, and we're going to add the new double exposure filter right here. Now, the way the double exposure filter works is it works kind of like a texturizer. It has a whole set of categories of different types of photos that work well for double exposures. There's natural textures, there's things like deserts and forests and birds and wildlife, you name it, all sorts of different categories that you can choose from. The light category is one of my favorites for doing double exposures. You pick the different kind of light photo that you want to use for it. Find one that you like. Oh, that was kind of cool. I like that cold look to it. And then I can control the mode that it blends with. That's the blending mode. Typically using something that's like lighten or screen is going to work best on a dark photo with a light background. Because again, we're trying to get it just on our subject, and you can control how strong that texture is applied. And then there's a masking section. Now, this one is automatically set to mask the subject, so it's only applying to the subject within my photo. But I can also apply it inversely to the background, or I could use the depth in the photo to apply it as well. And I'll show you some different cases where you might want to change those. And of course, you can move that double exposure texture around, and you could also scale it bigger and larger. That way you can kind of position it right where you want. I'm going to scale this one up a little bit larger. And I'm going to move it over just a little bit. I kind of want to make sure I don't interrupt her eye. That's kind of an important part of the photo. So there we go. We'll move it over. And then there's controls down here for adjusting the brightness and contrast of the overlay. So if I wanted to shift the color from being blue to maybe I want to make it red or green or a different color, I can easily change the appearance of that. And I can also adjust the background exposure. So if I have a photo that isn't as high key as this, I can make it look more high key by adjusting the background adjustment and actually blow out the background if I wanted to. And a photo like this, I can actually use it to control how blown out her hair is. So if I bring it down, you can see I can actually adjust, how much she gets blown out just like that. And it uses the built-in depth masking technology to do that. So you can have a lot of fun creating fun contemporary double exposures. And of course, you can import your own double exposure frames with it. Now, I know a lot of you guys are landscape photographers, and you're saying, what the heck am I ever going to use this for, Dan? This isn't for landscape photographers. Well, you can actually have a lot of fun with this filter. So let me show you a way that I would use it on a landscape photo instead. So let's just grab a different photo for us to work with here. Let's use this one. All right. So here I've got kind of a little landscapey texture. I'm going to crop this real quick because this happens to be a film scan. It is so old. Let's crop off some of that black off the sides. There we go. And now let's go try to add a double exposure to it. So I'm going to go over to my double exposures. And let's find something a little bit more natural in terms of a category for it. So I'm going to go to Nature's Textures, and let's take a look at through some of these different textures that I have in here, and just kind of flip through until we find one that we like. I'm going to change the blend mode on this guy to something brighter instead, like screen, and let's change our masking to none. We don't really want to mask anything in the photo, or maybe let's try depth actually, or maybe inverted depth. So when I use inverted depth, it's going to apply it more to the distant parts of the photo and less to the near parts of the photo. Pretty handy, huh? So there we go. I'm just going to adjust how bright I want this change to be, and we'll adjust our depth here a little bit to really control where it goes in and out of focus. That looks pretty good. And then maybe let's adjust the background exposure a little bit to brighten up that foreground a bit. So there we go. So we took this kind of dark old photo and we kind of brought it to life just by using another exposure along with it. It's just an example of how you could use this with things other than portraiture if you're a landscape photographer. Again, those things in that light category are so much fun, you can apply them to just about anything. It's a really fun way to experiment with your photos, especially if it's like a cold, rainy day and you're stuck inside and you can't go out and create new things with your camera. Sit at your computer and create new stuff there as well. All right, I think it's time to hand it back to Dylan. Dylan, what's up next?
So next up is going to be another new filter. We have a lot of really awesome new filters inside of Effects for Photo RAW 2026. But this filter is one of my favorites. It's the all-new motion filter. It allows you to incorporate panning, zooming, and twisting into your edits to get some really awesome stylistic creativity into your photographs. So with the motion filter inside of Photo RAW 2026, I'm a huge fan of using it to create those very iconic pans that you see in action photography, or you just see in urban street photography, where you pan across a scene, you capture the subject in motion, and you capture that subject with a focused, steady frame while the area surrounding them is a bit blurred with motion. So let's go into Effects, we'll add a filter, and we'll add the all-new motion filter. So I'm a huge fan, again, of that pan option. So I can just go into Styles here. I'm just going to choose Pan. It's going to add in a little bit of the amount into this motion section here. But the coolest thing about this motion filter is it actually protects your subject. So we can go down here to Protect, and we can choose either the subject or the background. So I've protected my subject here. I've brought in a little bit of motion. Let's just bring in a little bit more. And I'm also going to go in and modify that angle to fit the angle at which he's skateboarding. I'm also going to go down to the Protect section here. I'm going to add in just a little bit of feathering. And that's going to add in a little bit of that motion blur into our subject. And that's going to make things a little bit more realistic for the scene here. So as I turn this off and on, we have the original and then after, and it's created this really fun capture where we're actually bringing in some nice motion into the scene, and it's making it just a little bit more stylish and a little bit more interesting. If we were to pop maybe just a purely black and white filter on this, we're really focused in on that motion within the scene there. I'm really enjoying it. Now, there's a couple other motion types within the motion filter. So let me grab this image here, and I'll show you a quick way to add in a zoom look into the background behind your subjects. Let's go into Effects. We'll add a filter. Again, we'll add motion. This time we're going to choose zoom. Again, it's going to protect our subject for us. So we have none of that filter being applied to our subject, but we have this cool zoom motion going on in our scene. I'm just going to add in a little bit more there. And we have this really awesome stylistic background behind our subject now. And the cool thing about zoom is you can actually set the center of where you want the center of that zoom to be applied. So if you need it a little bit higher, you can modify that there to adjust where that zoom takes place. Now we also have twist as well, and I really love using the twist option for these wide angle close-ups. I think it works really well to just give a nice twisty background. So let's go into effects. I'll add a filter and we'll use again motion. And I'm going to use twist. You can see it's protected our subject there. We have this nice portraiture capture where she's protected. And so all we have to do now is modify the angle here, and that's going to give us our twist within the background. So let's just pull it up all of the way. We have a really cool twisty background now, and it's giving us this really cool twisty backdrop for our portrait capture. So I'm really digging this motion filter. I think it's really fun, especially when you're playing around with the pans and the zooms and even these twists here. It's just a really fun filter for getting creative with your editing. Now remember, inside of Photo RAW, you can add as many filters as you want. So you could go in and add in other filters right on top of this. So maybe a LUTs would be cool. And then you could go in here and maybe add in some cool color grading and see what you could come up with as far as some style goes for that twisty, creative background within your scene. And with that, I'll pass it right back to Dano, and he can cover some of the powerful enhancements for workflow and corrections inside of Photo RAW 2026.
Well, thanks, Dylan. I still have so much more to show you guys. There's so much stuff in 2026. So next up, let's talk about improvements in the transform pane. So here I am. I've opened up a photo. I'm inside of the develop tab of the edit module, and I've turned on the transform pane. If you've never used the transform pane before, it's to help you correct perspective or to add more perspective to your photo. What it can do is it can essentially take your photo and it can tilt it forward or backwards or side to side. Now, normally this is used for correcting perspective. So when the camera tilts up or down, you have to kind of do the opposite adjustment to fix it. So on a photo like this, obviously the camera is tilted up, and that makes the buildings lean in. It creates kind of that foreshortened look. Now, that could be an artistic choice. In a photo like this, I think it helps a lot. Maybe we want to actually enhance that and make it even more dramatic. So we would do that by grabbing the vertical slider in here, and you can see I can move it forward or backwards, and it lets me recompose the photo. Now, if you're a longtime user, you've noticed that as I'm making these adjustments, it's automatically scaling the photo to fit the canvas now. I no longer get those annoying little black edges that I would then have to crop off. We automatically mesh the photo to fit better. So that's probably the first biggest improvement, and that in and of itself is a huge improvement in this. But there's even more new stuff in here. So you notice there's two new tools. There's a horizontal and a vertical perspective tool. And what I can do with these is I can simply just align two lines, either horizontally or vertically, and it'll correct the photo for me automatically. So if I grab the vertical tool, you can see it puts two lines on my photo. All I do is I line it up on two things that should be parallel to each other. So if I want to make my building straight, I just put one on the corner of each building, just like this, here and here and here and here. And then I hit the apply button and bang, it automatically adjusts it so that it has now leveled the photo. It's made sure those lines are nice and parallel to each other. All right, let's show you a couple more complex photos, what you can do, however. So let's just pop up the old film strip here. And let's grab a photo like this one. Let me zoom in here a little bit. That's kind of tiny. And on a beautiful architecture shot like this, you can see how even though the photographer did their best to try to line things up, there's still a little bit of a tilt. And it's actually in two different directions on this photo. So this is a case where using the keystone tool is very helpful. It actually lets you put a box on the photo, and then it will align both different axes at the same time and correct everything. So we'll turn our keystone tool on. And what I want to do is I want to look for a pair of horizontal and vertical lines that I can use. Well, obviously there's a really nice straight line here and a straight line across the top. And then I've got these angled lines on the left and the right. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set those four corners so that they are on the junction of those lines. There we go. You can actually zoom in if you want to be hyper accurate with this as well. And let's see, we're going to use this line over here, I think. So I'm going to, again, I'm just adjusting these until everything lines up perfectly. There you go. So I'm using this line and this line for the horizontal and this line for the vertical. Once I get that set, I hit the apply button and boom, look at that. It has now made it perfectly square on all the different axes. Let me turn it on and off so you can see before and after. And you can see the adjustments that it's calculated automatically. It has to adjust the horizontal and vertical. It's leveled it. It's even adjust skew, whatever the heck skew is, but it's some magical thing that you need to have to be able to do these kinds of adjustments correctly. All right. Now, one of the other cool things that we've added is an amount slider to it. So even though it's made that adjustment and it is technically 100% correct, maybe it's not as pleasing to your eye, or maybe in order to achieve it, it has to crop off more than what you want. So you can actually fade that adjustment back. I'll show you where that can come in handy. Let's take a photo like this one here. This is shot with the camera tilted way up and panning to the right. So you can see there's a lot of distortion in it. Well, I can fix that, but it ends up having to crop off quite a bit of my photo to do that. So if I grab my keystone tool here again, and let's use, again, something that we know should be nice and straight, like this block on the building here. There we go. So I get it aligned and I hit it. Well, great. This is a perfect rectangle now, but I've lost a lot of the building on the right and it looks kind of over-corrected. Well, watch. I can use the amount slider and I can actually fade that back. So I can actually get a visual compromise. So instead of being 100% perfect, maybe I want something that is in between, something that's a little bit corrected, but still gives me a little bit of that distortion. So it looks better than the original, like that. All right, there we go. So that's improvements to the transform tool. Next, I want to show you guys the new negative mode. So this is kind of a trend that we're seeing a lot in the kind of the restoration space, where people are actually using their normal camera, either their camera with a macro lens or they're using their phone like an iPhone, and they're actually taking photographs of their negatives from the past, either color negatives or black and white negatives. Well, the problem is when you get those into your computer, they look something like this. They're not super usable, you know, and if you go in and you try to make adjustments, you try to remove that color cast, it's pretty hard to get something that looks normal in them. So I'm just going to our edit mode here, and I'm going to go to the tone and color pane. You'll see there's a new control down here at the bottom called mode. It defaults to positive. That means anything that you would normally shoot with your camera is a positive. But if I photographed a color negative or a monochrome negative, it'll automatically invert it for you and correct the color. So I just changed from positive to color negative, and voila, look, it's automatically flipped it so it's the right colors. And now when I make adjustments with the sliders in here, they're going the right direction. So if I want to make it brighter, I would bring the exposure up or the exposure down, the same kind of adjustments we would if it was a normal raw photo. And I can use all of the same tools that I would inside of Photo RAW on these captures. And of course, capturing with your camera is a lot faster than using a traditional film scanner. So, and this works with both raw photos and non-raw photos as well. All right, let's see. I still have a couple more things that I want to show you guys, some other new improvements. So you will notice in the properties inspector, that's the thing up here where we have the masking controls. And of course, that's also where blending options and the text controls live. It appears over here as a nested pane on the right-hand side, and that's going to be there by default. But if you work on a small screen, you have the ability to now move that. And of course, the layers pane, which I've got rolled up here, but if I roll it down, my layers pane, I can make either of those floating, and I can also nest them on the left-hand side, because a lot of us have a small screen and maybe we don't use presets as much, so we can actually move them over. So let me show you. I'm just going to open up my preset drawer here. You notice that my presets, I don't see the thumbnails for the categories, I just see a list view. That's actually always been there. A lot of people just didn't know it's there. You can control that by going to the window menu. Sorry, wrong preview menu. Go to the preset browser option and you can control whether it's a list view or a thumbnail view. See, most of you are used to seeing this view, but if those colors are distracting for you, you can just go to the view menu, preset browser, and turn it to list view instead. And then if I want to move these panes to the other side, go to the window menu, go to layers, and rather than having it nest on the right, choose nest on the left. And look, now the layers lives over here, giving you more room on the right. You can do the same thing with that masking pane. That's what I do too. So I'm going to go to my properties inspector and I'll say nest it over on the left. So now I've got more room on the right to view my filters or view my develop adjustments. Less space for my presets. It just kind of depends on the way you like to work. And of course, you can also make either of those floating windows as well. So if you work on a multi-monitor environment, you can actually move the masking and move the layers to a separate monitor if you want to instead. So just kind of another way to help you customize and make your workspace the way that you like it. So tons of other new stuff. I don't have time to cover every little thing that's new in Photo RAW 2026. There's support for a bunch of new cameras, a bunch of new and improved lens profiles to do the correction for you automatically. We've added support for Windows ARM processors natively now. Keep in mind, this first version, there's a couple things that we weren't able to support, like tethered shooting yet. That'll be coming soon as the camera manufacturers update their SDKs to support Windows ARM as well. Still very early days in the Windows ARM world. So tons of new stuff. We hope this was informative to you guys. You got to see all the cool new features in Photo RAW 2026. It is available today. So if you've pre-ordered, you can download it from your account now. If you haven't ordered it yet, go to on1.com and you'll get the best price on this brand new version. You can download a 30-day trial if you want to. And of course, we have a 30-day money-back guarantee. So you could just purchase it, try it, you'll love it. If for some reason you don't, you can always return it. All right, there you go. Back to you, Dylan. Anything else?
Nope, Dano, I think that's pretty much it. That's going to conclude our ON1 Photo RAW 2026 from A to Z event. Thank you so much for joining us today. We can't wait to see what you're creating with the latest version of Photo RAW. Let us know your favorite feature, let us know how you're digging it, and enjoy the new version. We hope you're as excited as we are. Thanks, everyone.